Hey guys, it's Rachel. It is Thankful Thursday. I'm outside because it is beautiful out here and I have a little boy, I think, who says hello. He says hello. No, he's saying no, mummy. It's Thankful Thursday and as I've said, I'm outside because we're having the most glorious spring day and you know how much of a fan I am of the spring. So I came and sat out here at lunch with some close family friends, and a conversation kind of evolved because I was discussing how with Beat I'm going to be facilitating this self-help group, and one of the ladies kind of commented that as a teenager she'd had an eating disorder and that she never kind of found that idea of self-help particularly helpful. And I found that quite interesting because I think that quite often you come across that people are very wary of group situations with an eating disorder. There's a lot of shame attached to them, and having been someone who's been to them, I know that it can take an awful lot of courage to get to them. So my sort of remarks around self-help with her were kind of, there is this kind of stereotypical view that self-help is about buying a self-help book or going to a self-help group. But self-help can be anything. It can be any step. A self-help step could be you watching these videos, and even if you aren't in a position to alter your behaviours, the fact that you're watching these videos and you're making the effort to do something that is encouraging you towards recovery. It can be having a coffee date with a friend once a week. It can be keeping a blog where you do your writing or you do something creative. It can be once a week sitting down and finding a list of inspirational quotes to put in a journal. It can be a happy book. I had one of those where it's something I'd particularly enjoyed in a day, like hugging my cat. I'd write in it, I hugged my cat and it made me really happy for like 5 minutes or what have you. So that to me is self-help, and for each person, and depending who they are, where they are, what stage of recovery they are, self-help differs. But if you're trying, if you're working towards something better than just being your eating disorder or your illness, that to me is self-help. Within that scope of self-help is the idea of self-help groups. I don't know how I feel about that terminology, self-help, but that's actually what the self-help network is termed by Beat, the UK eating disorder charity. So I will be a self-help group facilitator. I won't be a therapist. I'll be there to facilitate the conversation, to encourage people to articulate perhaps where they're at and to support one another. And that is the idea of self-help. Now, I've been to a number of self-help groups. I'm not the biggest fan of groups, and yet there have been experiences for me which I've found particularly helpful with regards to self-help. The groups that I've been to for self-help are only eating disorder groups. I considered going to one for my kind of mood issues, and I never really managed to do that. And where I had the self-help group was actually somewhere where I was having support anyway. So I knew the kind of facilitators, and that kind of helped. Group dynamics play a huge part, and that might sound like a really obvious thing to say, but I've been in groups whereby I felt incredibly supported and understood, and actually left feeling more positive because the people in the group are actually in a similar place to me. We support each other and we move each other forward. Sometimes people can be in very different places, one more towards recovered state but still needing support, another person kind of in a very difficult place, and sometimes that can clash and it can be difficult for both sides because there can be a kind of conflict which isn't a personal thing, but it's a personal thing. It's just very much people being in different places, and obviously that's why you have facilitators there. Why have self-help groups helped me? They've helped me because they've made me realise I'm not alone. Eating disorders and other mental health problems can make you feel incredibly isolated. Self-help groups have helped me because, the competition can be there. The fact that you're going somewhere with people who know what it feels like to suffer with an eating disorder is already putting you in a situation where you're not going to be judged and you're more likely to be understood. On top of that, you've got the facilitators who have either been there themselves or have had training to be able to support you in that. So that's why it can be helpful, because even if you just sit there and you don't say a word, just being in the environment of other people who know how it feels to be there, even if it's just for an hour and a half, and then you go off on your week and you do whatever it is doing, school, whatever, your job, for that moment in time you're with people who do understand you. When you go to a self-help group, there's no expectation on you. There is nothing that says you have to talk, you have to engage. You can quite simply listen. And what I found, and I know other people have found, that simply being there, listening to what other people say, can not only make us feel less isolated, but also sometimes when we're so irrational in our heads with eating disorders, somebody can say something and we can think, well, that's crazy that they're thinking that, but I think that, and yet this person certainly isn't fat or stupid or worthless or uncreative or not intelligent or a million other words. And sometimes hearing about another person's behaviours, although I'm aware they can be triggering, and that's why we have to be careful and facilitate these types of groups, it can also, if we learn to care for another, it does something to us that perhaps makes it easier for us to be a bit more careful or a bit more nurturing towards ourselves. Because if we can offer out support to another and say, you know what, you deserve more than being in this relationship with this person doing these things to you, it can make you reflect on your own relationships. And if all you do is reflect, sometimes that's all people do. People hear about another person's experience, they link it to themselves and think, well, I'm in this situation, and even if they can't change it, just the fact that the process is there. And this is the whole idea around self-help for me. It isn't about being forced, it isn't being about told what you have to do. It's about taking the steps in your own time in a way that feels manageable, reasonable, appropriate. You're in control of it, and I think that that's the most powerful thing, because so often within eating disorders we're forced into treatment, forced into situations we don't feel able to manage. And whilst I value the fact that sometimes people do need to be in hospital, people do need to be trying to receive help, people do need to be eating and gaining weight or losing weight or not throwing up or whatever it is they need to be doing, for it to be real, for it to stick, it has to be about you. And that for me is the big thing, that if you can find the courage to go to a self-help group, and even if you just go once, that is massive. That is absolutely huge. Sorry, you can just hear the horses going past. And that's something you should feel very proud of. And any of you, if you're watching these videos and you're going to go to a self-help group, I know I'm going to be facilitating one, now the dogs are going, and Ariel facilitates one. We're here, we understand, you know, if there is a self-help group in your area, even if you just pick up the phone and can speak to one of the facilitators, get a bit of reassurance, you know, you can ask them questions about, you know, obviously there's confidentiality about the nature of some of the people who are in the groups, what sort of the group size is, what the experience of perhaps being in a self-help group is like, and to respond to calls about the group and concerning the group. And you know, self-help groups aren't for everybody. Some people might find that they actually make it more difficult for them because of the competitive nature of eating disorders and that comparison. But even if you meet with people sort of once a week, once every 2 weeks or whatever it is, and that's the only contact you have with them, and you then want to go and get on with what you're doing in your life, and that's fine too. There's pros and cons of having people in your life who have struggles. The pros being that they understand, they've been there, you can support one another. The cons are that if things start to get really deteriorate for them or become very bad, that it can negatively affect you. And so there's pros and cons of that, and maybe actually that's an idea for another video. But yeah, I would say to you, if there's a self-help group in your area, have a go, you know, phone the facilitator, have a word about it, try, and see if it gives you some support, because I know that the one thing that is severely lacking, not in this country but the world over, is support. So if there is something there for you, have a go, get some reassurance, go for, get there a little bit earlier. If you can only stay for 10-15 minutes, you know, at least you've had a go. And yeah, so I would encourage you to do that, and I hope that, you know, some of that sort of support can be helping some of you guys out there. Me and the boy, we're going to leave you, and I'll see you next week. Okay guys, bye, take care.